The Cleveland Browns did the unthinkable. They had lightning in a bottle, ratings gold, cultural relevance, the kind of spark franchises dream about, and instead of letting it burn bright, they stuffed it in a box, taped it shut, and left it on the bench. And the result? A ratings collapse so obvious that even the NFL couldn't spin it. Because here's the truth. When Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field in his preseason debut, it wasn't just football fans who tuned in. It was everybody. Casuals who never watch preseason. Younger fans who only know the game through TikTok highlights. People who were curious about what Deion Sanders' son might do in his first real NFL action. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. And what happened? He delivered. 14 for 23, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. And most importantly, he looked calm, he looked polished, he looked ready. That's why the ratings popped. 2.2 million people tuned into a meaningless preseason game. Let me repeat that. 2.2 million for a game that doesn't even count. That's higher than some regular season matchups that networks pay billions to broadcast. That's higher than some NBA playoff games. That's not a fluke. That's the Shedeur Sanders effect. But instead of riding that wave, instead of doubling down, the Browns benched him. They went with Dillon Gabriel. And just like that, the air got sucked out of the stadium. Viewership plummeted. Social media quieted down. And the NFL's golden ticket was tossed into the drawer. It's like the Browns had Beyoncé in the building and told us sit down so the local karaoke guy could take the mic. Sure, Gabriel isn't terrible, but let's be honest, nobody outside of Oklahoma is rushing to see him play. He doesn't draw. He doesn't sell jerseys. He doesn't make SportsCenter's front page. He doesn't get Twitter trending at midnight. Shedeur does all of that and more without even trying. The numbers don't lie. When Sanders plays, ratings spike. When he doesn't, they tank. This isn't just a football decision. This is a business decision gone horribly wrong. And the people feeling it first aren't even the fans. It's the networks and advertisers who pay good money for eyeballs that vanish the second Sanders hit the bench. And you can feel the tension. Broadcasters are frustrated. Analysts are dumbfounded. And fans are flat out furious. Because the Browns didn't just make a coaching call. They insulted their audience. They told 2.2 million people who tuned in for Sanders, "We don't care what you want." And viewers responded in kind. "Fine. We won't watch." This is where it gets even worse for Cleveland. Because Shedeur isn't just a rookie quarterback. He's a brand. He's a storyline. He's a walking headline. His last name alone carries more weight than most franchises. And every time he sits, the NFL is losing more than just yards on the field. They're losing relevance off it. Think about how rare that is. We've had hype rookies before. Sure, Johnny Manziel had buzz. Baker Mayfield had buzz. Tim Tebow had mania. But Shedeur is different. He's part of a larger cultural moment. He's tied to Deion Sanders' resurgence in college football, to Colorado's massive media run, to a younger generation that values personality and storylines as much as performance. Shedeur represents a new era of the NFL, where the quarterback is not just a field general, but a media star, a social presence, a face of the league. And the Browns are acting like they don't see it. Instead of embracing the new reality, Cleveland is clinging to outdated ideas about development and protecting their rookie. That sounds good in press conferences, but fans aren't buying it. They know what's really happening. The Browns are scared. Scared of handing the keys to a rookie with as much power. Scared of disrupting the locker room hierarchy. Scared of dealing with the fallout if he actually surpasses their veterans. But here's the irony. By keeping him benched, they're creating an even bigger problem. Because now, every time Gabriel throws an interception, fans will scream for Shedeur. Every time Flacco looks his age, fans will scream for Shedeur. And every time ratings dip, every time jerseys stop selling, every time social media cools off, people will remember, this wouldn't be happening if Shedeur was playing. And let's talk about the money, because this is where the Browns might regret their decision the most. Ratings equal revenue. Advertisers pay for star power. Networks beg for storylines. And Shadur checks every single box. By benching him, the Browns didn't just hurt themselves. They hurt the NFL's bottom line. They left millions on the table. Millions in ads, millions in merchandise, millions in new fans who would have tuned in for the Sanders storyline. But Shadur, he doesn't lose here. Not really. If anything, his stock is rising faster than ever. Because the more the Browns hold him back, the more people want to see him unleashed. Every headline about him being benched, every fan tweet demanding his name, every angry analyst segment, it all feeds into the legend. It all makes him bigger. And when the Browns finally crack, when they finally put him back on the field, the ratings will explode again. That's why the NFL needs Shadur more than he needs them. He doesn't have to beg for snaps. He doesn't have to chase opportunities. His time is coming regardless. The only question is, will it be in Cleveland or somewhere else? And trust me, rival teams are already circling. They're watching the Browns mishandle this situation the same way the rest of us are. And they're waiting. They're waiting for Cleveland to get desperate, to shop Sanders around, to make the kind of short-sighted decision that has defined this franchise for decades. Because if Shadur ever hits the trade market, he won't be on it long. The Raiders would scoop him up in a heartbeat. Vegas loves stars, and Shadur would sell out that stadium every week. The Falcons, they bring him home to the South, pair him with Bijan Robinson, and instantly have one of the most marketable offenses in the league. Even the Jets, imagine Shadur in New York under the brightest lights, carrying himself with the swagger that city craves. And meanwhile, Cleveland would be left holding the bag. Again, just another chapter in their long history of fumbling franchise quarterbacks, of letting stars slip through their fingers, of turning potential into punchlines. That's why this isn't just about football. It's about reputation. It's about legacy. And right now, the Browns are once again living up to their reputation as the NFL's most dysfunctional franchise. But here's the plot twist. Shadur doesn't need Cleveland to fix it. He doesn't need them to see the light. His star is rising no matter what. The real question is whether the Browns will ride that wave with him or watch from the sidelines as he shines somewhere else. And judging by history, we already know how this story ends. The Browns think the storm will pass. They think fans will move on, that the noise will quiet down, and that the spotlight will shift back to safer, controllable storylines. But here's the truth. This isn't going away. Not tomorrow, not next week, not this season. Because when you're dealing with Shadur Sanders, you're not just dealing with a quarterback. You're dealing with a cultural movement. And movements don't disappear when you shove them to the bench. You know what makes this whole mess even juicier? The Browns don't realize that every game they play without Shadur is essentially a referendum on their front office. It's no longer just about wins and losses. It's about perception. And right now, every time Dillon Gabriel jogs out there, fans aren't watching to see how he performs. They're watching to see how quickly he screws up so they can demand Sanders. And let's be real. The comparisons are brutal. When Gabriel plays, the energy feels flat. Even when he makes a decent throw, there's no buzz, no spark, no electricity. But when Shadur steps on the field, even a simple 8-yard completion feels like a moment. It feels like you're watching something special grow in real time. That difference? You can't coach it. You can't buy it. That's called star power. And Cleveland had it right there and decided to bury it. What makes this even more insane is how much Cleveland, as a city, has been starved for a storyline like this. Think about it. This is a fan base that's been living in football misery for decades. Their highlight reel isn't full of championships. It's full of heartbreak, the drive, the fumble, the decision. And now, they finally have a fresh face, a generational buzz, someone who could carry the city into a new era, and they're watching him rot on the depth chart. Do you know how demoralizing that is for fans? It's like you finally get the keys to a Ferrari, but the dealership tells you you're not allowed to drive it until you've proven you can parallel park in a Honda Civic. And the media circus only adds gasoline to the fire. ESPN, FS1, podcasts, TikTok, Twitter, they're not talking about Cleveland's long-term strategy. They're talking about how Shadur Sanders got benched. They're running segments on how ratings fell off a cliff when he wasn't playing. They're roasting the Browns as a franchise that still doesn't get it. That narrative becomes bigger than the games themselves. Here's the kicker. The Browns aren't just losing ratings, they're losing credibility. Fans don't trust his front office. Analysts don't trust Stefanski's leadership. And even players. Oh, you better believe some of them are side-eyeing these decisions in the locker room. Because every guy on that roster knows the NFL is about two things: talent and opportunity. If the most talented quarterback on the roster isn't being given the opportunity, what does that say to everyone else? It says politics matter more than performance. And once that belief sets in, your locker room chemistry starts to fracture. Guys stop buying into the system. They stop believing effort will be rewarded. And the whole operation starts to rot from the inside. And let's not pretend the rest of the NFL isn't watching this dumpster fire unfold. Rival GMs are licking their chops. You don't think teams are calling quietly, floating offers, checking the temperature around Sanders? Of course they are, because the Browns have backed themselves into a corner. They either sit Sanders, lose ratings, lose fans, and lose money, or they trade him and instantly look like the dumbest franchise alive when he blows up somewhere else. And make no mistake, he will blow up somewhere else. Can you imagine Sanders in Atlanta, playing in a dome, surrounded by young offensive talent, back in the South where football isn't just a sport, it's a religion? That city would crown him in a heartbeat. Or what about Las Vegas? The Raiders are always chasing star power, and putting Shedeur in Sin City would make him the face of the franchise overnight. He'd be on every billboard, every commercial, every highlight package. The buzz alone would sell tickets for years. Even Miami. Can you imagine the Sanders brand mixing with the South Beach spotlight? Tyreek Hill on one side, Jalen Waddle on the other, and Shedeur pulling the strings? That would be a cultural takeover. The possibilities are endless, which is exactly why Cleveland looks foolish for even entertaining the idea of trading him. Or worse, benching him into irrelevance. But here's the tragic part of all this. Cleveland is doing what Cleveland always does. They're sabotaging themselves. This franchise has a history of turning promise into disaster. Tim Couch, Brady Quinn, Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield. The list goes on. And now they're running the same playbook with Shedeur. But this isn't like those other situations. This isn't about Shedeur being a bust. This isn't about him being immature or unprepared or unprofessional. This is about the organization being scared of his power, scared of his spotlight, scared of what it means if their carefully crafted plans get disrupted by a rookie who just so happens to be better than the guys they paid millions to protect. That's the dirty secret here. The Browns don't have a football problem. They have an ego problem, and fans can see right through it. They know the team is choosing pride over progress. They know Shedeur isn't being benched for his own good. He's being benched to protect the fragile hierarchy inside the building, and that makes the betrayal sting even more. Because for once, Browns fans had hope, not just regular hope, but real, tangible, national spotlight hope. And it's being ripped away. Not by an injury, not by bad luck, but by their own front office. And you know what happens when fans feel betrayed? They check out. They stop showing up. They stop buying jerseys. They stop watching. And for a team like Cleveland, which has lived off the loyalty of one of the most passionate fan bases in sports, that's the ultimate disaster. Because once you lose the trust of your people, it's almost impossible to get it back. The Browns may not realize it now, but they're playing with fire. Every game Shedeur sits, the resentment grows. Every snap Gabriel takes, the frustration builds. And when the viewership numbers come back lower than expected, when ticket sales dip, when jerseys stop moving off shelves, they'll scramble for answers. But by then, it might be too late. Because Shedeur Sanders doesn't need Cleveland to be great. His path to stardom is inevitable. The only question left is whether the Browns will be remembered as a team smart enough to embrace him or the team stupid enough to waste him. And if history is any indicator, we already know which side they're leaning toward. So buckle up, because this isn't just a quarterback controversy anymore. This is a full-blown cultural battle between old-school football politics and new-school superstar power, between a franchise stuck in the past and a player built for the future. And if Cleveland doesn't figure out soon, they're not just going to lose games. They're going to lose Shedeur Sanders. And when that happens, they won't just lose a quarterback. They'll lose their last, best chance at relevance. The craziest part about all this? The Browns don't even understand the ripple effects of what they've done. This isn't just a roster decision. It's a cultural blunder. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't only a quarterback, he's a walking ecosystem. He brings cameras, endorsements, younger audiences, and conversations that stretch far beyond Sunday afternoon football. And when you sit him, you don't just lose a player. You lose an entire movement. Think about how rare that is in the NFL. How many quarterbacks can you honestly say people tune in just to watch them personally, regardless of the team? There's Patrick Mahomes. There's Lamar Jackson. Maybe Jalen Hurts. A handful at most. And then there's Shedeur, who, keep in mind, hasn't even started an NFL regular season game yet and already has that magnetism. But Cleveland? They treat him like he's just another rookie. Like he's a developmental project who needs to earn his stripes. And maybe that logic would fly in the 1990s. But in today's sports landscape, it's borderline malpractice. Because Shedeur already earned his stripes, just in a different arena. He won the media game before he ever put on that Browns uniform. He's mastered the art of connecting with fans, curating his image, and balancing pressure without letting it break him. That's not hype, that's currency. And Cleveland's basically burning money by refusing to let him shine. Now here's where it gets even messier. You can feel the divide between ownership and the coaching staff growing wider with every passing week. Jimmy Haslam isn't blind. He sees the viewership numbers. He hears the boos in the stadium. He watches the jersey sales plummet the second Shedeur's not on the field. For him, this isn't about ego, it's about business. And benching Shedeur is bad business. But Kevin Stefanski? He's coaching like a man obsessed with control. Like he's more interested in keeping order in his quarterback room than in winning games or energizing fans. He thinks that starting Gabriel or clinging to Joe Flacco proves he's a steady hand. But what it really proves is that he's terrified of losing control to a rookie who already has more sway with fans than he does with his own locker room. And let's be honest, that's the heart of the scandal. Stefanski doesn't just see Shedeur as a quarterback. He sees him as a threat. Because what happens if Shedeur comes in and wins? What happens if he instantly turns the team around, gets the crowd buzzing, puts the Browns on primetime highlight reels for the first time in forever? Well, then the story isn't about Stefanski's coaching brilliance. It's about Shedeur's arrival. And suddenly, Stefanski becomes expendable. It's fear, pure and simple. And fear makes people act irrational, which is why we've got Stefanski spinning injury narratives, hiding behind depth charts, and giving Gabriel opportunities he hasn't earned. He's trying to buy time. But every second he buys, he loses more credibility. And the locker room can feel it. Players aren't stupid. They know when politics outweigh talent. Veterans see the same practices the fans don't get to. They watch Shedeur hit throws that Gabriel can't. They watch him command huddles with calmness that you can't fake. And then they watch him jog off to the sideline, helmet in hand, while someone less capable runs the offense. That kills trust. It kills morale. Because if you're a defensive player busting your body every snap, you want to know the best guy is under center, not the guy the coach feels safest with. And this is where the Browns are in danger of completely losing the plot. Because once you lose your locker room, once the players stop believing the coaching staff is making decisions in good faith, it's over. You can't get that back. And meanwhile, the outside world is just watching Cleveland implode in real time. Rival teams are laughing. Executives are shaking their heads. Fans are building memes out of the chaos. You'd think Cleveland would want to avoid becoming a circus, but somehow they've managed to turn one of the most exciting rookies in years into the biggest controversy of the season. And here's the kicker. This whole thing is backfiring on Cleveland in the exact opposite way they intended. They thought they were minimizing distraction by sitting Shedeur. But in reality, they've created a bigger distraction than ever before. Every press conference is about him. Every headline includes his name. Every time Gabriel throws an interception or Flacco misses a read, the chants start, "We want Shedeur." And that pressure cooker is only going to get hotter. You can already feel the national media rallying around this storyline. ESPN panels debating it every morning. Skip and Shannon making it the first topic of the day. Pat McAfee dropping one-liners about how Cleveland is wasting talent. Even casual TikTok fans who don't care about the Browns are making content about Shedeur getting benched. He's not just a football story anymore. He's a cultural lightning rod. And that's what makes this whole thing so dangerous for Cleveland. They're not in control of the narrative anymore. Shedeur is. He doesn't even have to say a word. All he has to do is post a photo in the gym, or a clip of him studying film, or even a cryptic emoji. And boom, the internet runs wild with speculation. That's power. That's leverage. And if Cleveland doesn't respect it, somebody else will. Because don't think for a second other franchises aren't paying attention. Atlanta? They'd make him the face of the city overnight. Vegas? They'd plaster him on every billboard. Denver? Imagine the irony of Sanders bringing star power back to the franchise his dad once electrified. There are teams desperate for exactly what Shedeur represents. Young talent with cultural gravity. And Cleveland's out here fumbling it like it's just another mid-round project. Which brings us to the ultimate irony. The Browns, a franchise defined by decades of relevance, finally stumble into relevance, and their first instinct is to hide it. It's almost poetic in the saddest way possible. And you know what? Maybe Shedeur doesn't even need Cleveland. Maybe Cleveland needs Shedeur more than he'll ever need them, because his path to superstardom isn't tied to a single city. His brand is portable. His influence is mobile. Whether it's Cleveland, Atlanta, Vegas, or somewhere else, Shedeur's going to shine. The real question is whether Cleveland will be remembered as the place that launched him or the place that wasted him. And if history is any guide, we all know which way that story usually goes.